morning, good evening, depending upon what part of the world you're in. If it's Friday, it's the CEO series, and our goal is to bring to you the most exciting people to discuss their amazing careers, their successes, detours, U-turns, learning points, etc. So our guest today, longtime friend, is Melanio Gomez, a maestro in the world of design who's collaborated with giants like Estee Lauder, Tiffany, as well as our former employer, Martha Stewart Living, to guiding expats in Brussels. His touch transcends genres. Yet it is not just the printed page or storefront that captures his passion. He's a connoisseur of history, evident in his restoration of a 17th century Flemish bookstore. And with that, I bring the maestro in. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me. This is a pleasure to do, and it's good to see you again.
It's
Being
good.
an alumni.
Alumni. Yeah, I had to take my pinstripe off and put a little more creative stuff because I got the creative maestro here. So that's why my
There
look
you
is a
go.
little different today. So I always like to start everything off with your career. And you've had a fascinating journey from art school to where you are now. So walk us through that. Give us kind of a short version of art school too.
To that. When I was a child, my father was a physician, and when you're five, and then they say, "Oh, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And you said, "Oh, I'm going to be a doctor like my dad," and that sort of fades. It
Yeah.
fades away as you get older. And I think from a young age, I was always artistic, and they saw that. So I'm really lucky that I had parents who sort of supported the idea of going to art school. And so I applied and I got in, and it just started from there. I've gone through several. I initially wanted to be, I thought, a painter, but then an illustrator. And then I finally went into graphics because
Okay.
I think as you try things, what, that isn't going to work for me,
Yeah.
right? Like I'm going to figure it out and go on to the next thing. And I ended up in graphics. And when I graduated, I went to a counselor and I said, "What graphic design makes the most money? I need to make a living." And they
Yeah.
said packaging design. So I redid my portfolio, and I came to New York, got a job at a packaging design firm, and worked there for a while. And this is before computers, and I was responsible for those little banners on the side of products that say 30% more or new and improved, and before computers, and I had to do it all by hand.
You would improve 2.0.
Yeah, exactly. And then, but simultaneously, when I started freelancing, I took full-time jobs at design firms. But then at the same time, I had these friends from college who wanted to start a sort of a multidiscipline design firm. So I was kind of doing that at night while working during the day. And it started out as a tabletop with two industrial designers and myself. And it kind of grew. It kind of grew to a point where we had to quit our jobs and do it full time. And then I think that was a time when it it was very scary. It was scary to leave a full-time job, especially in New
Yeah.
York City. So,
Yeah.
but you learn a lot. You do learn a lot during that time. And then it
Mm.
kind of just went from there. After that, we did that for several years. We were really proud of what we made. And they were desktop accessories. And then it kind of evolved into lamps. And then we were doing that. And then we'd all decided to go in different directions. I think it was a time when we were making everything in the United States, and we wanted to continue to do that in Philadelphia, actually. And we had to make a decision whether to go abroad. And we just didn't have the capital to do it.
Yeah.
And we're just like, you know what, let's, they wanted to do something else. I wanted to do something else. And then that's when I freelanced again. And then I took a job at Martha.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So when you came there, you had just come off your entrepreneurial stint at that time.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had that business for several years. And I originally interviewed for a product development job because that was my expertise at the time.
Okay.
And a friend of mine, Aisha Patel, called me and said, I heard you're interviewing at Living. Would you consider coming to magazine? And then that's when I interviewed with Stephen Earle and
Oh,
the
wow.
the
Oh,
stylist at the time. And then I got that job. And that was a turning point for me because it was the beginning of the golden years, as you know, at Martha, where it was at its best.
it was at its best. I spoke to her last week.
Hmm.
She's told me that she's going to be a guest the first part of the year. So
Okay,
we,
good.
yeah, so we've been having this conversation back and forth. I said, and here's the reason why I say that because, and I told her that she was in Dubai last year sometime, and I said, do you have any idea as to how many creative people you had that went off to do great things across the globe? And I said, I
Absolutely.
think you need some acknowledgement as it relates to that. And she kind of sat there and she thought about it. But that was the conversation we had. But I wanted to go back to something you said. You wanted to become a doctor because everybody said that. But your parents said your views were a little different, creative, and your parents said, do this. You know what I thought about? I don't know whether you remember, we adopted Art and Design High School
Hmm.
in New York. And I remember at that first graduation, Gail Towey gave the commencement address. I got Gail to come over and give the commencement address because that was our high school. Nobody had done that. And one of the parents came up and told me the exact same story that she wanted her kid son to be a school teacher because you'll always have a job or something like that. And she said, I listened to Miss Towey talk through her careers and her transitions as to how everybody was pointing her one way. She did her own thing. And she says, I'm confirmed tonight he can follow his dream.
Oh, that's the best thing you can hear, really, right? When someone has that the kind of support like that, And I think my mom has been my biggest champion, through the years.
Hmm.
She's always been really proud, as I am of her. So it's great.
Okay.
It's great to have that.
So it's kind of a two-way admiration society. Yeah, go ahead, do cool things, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They say as you get older, you turn into one of your parents. I've definitely turned into my mom.
Yeah. I think I've turned in the character of both my mom and dad. My father for business, my mother more towards empathy because she cared about everything,
Yeah.
So
Well,
it was
the idea of business and learning that it's that balance of art and commerce, right?
yeah.
And I think that's one of the hardest things. I just spoke to a professor someone who taught at my alma mater, Philadelphia University of the Arts, and he said now they do have those classes. They have those art and commerce classes, but back when I was, no one really taught you that the business end of it.
Yeah, you were just in that category. So one of the other points you talked about when your friends came together and you created this business.
Mhm.
So from an art mindset, now revenue
Yeah, yes.
is
No business plan,
no
no
business
capital.
plan. It's
Yeah,
all seat of the pants. How do I make
yeah.
this work?
It started out with, I had taken a class in art school in bookbinding, and the last
Okay.
project of the class was make something that's not a book. So I took these marble papers and I made frames, and then they were sitting in my New York apartment, and my friend Mary came up actually for a design show, and she looked at them and said, I think that we should sell these. And I'm like, really? And she goes, well, let me see what I can do. And then so
Yeah.
she went away. She came back the next week and said, I have an order for 25 of these from a store. I went in, cold call, and it took us forever to make these 25 frames. And then we're like, I don't know if we can do it. And then it sort of just started to grow. And you know, I'm glad that I had the energy to work
Yeah.
during the day and then do that at night. So
Mhm.
it kind of paid off.
Yeah. So one of our frequent guest who always listens into the show, John Self, based out of Texas, just commented. He says sometimes a career upset can open a door to follow a long ignored dream, whether we had the dream or not, and you tried something.
Yeah, yeah. And there's pitfalls too. I remember in my first design job, within the first month, I felt like I wasn't getting it. And my boss had said to me, I don't think it's working out. I took
Mm,
that so hard. I,
yeah,
I that had never happened to me. And all of a sudden you're just like, what is going on? And then I remember working 3 times as hard. And then when I eventually left that job, she gave me a compliment of how much I had grown. And I'll never forget that, because you can turn it around. I feel
yeah,
like that you
yeah,
can turn it around. And like this gentleman said, every no can become a yes eventually,
yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah. So when I think about, I'm recording today. I'm in Dubai, and all of this came about because of upsets along the way. If I were ever on a show like this, it would probably take 2 to 3 hours to talk through.
Yeah, yeah. And this, I mean, just the ability today in the digital age to do all this,
Yeah,
there wasn't Instagram, there wasn't YouTube, there wasn't, all those things that someone can, if they want to get their content out there, they
mm,
can, and I think
yeah,
that's how it's changed publishing in a way, where I think a lot of magazines have leveraged themselves to the digital age,
yeah,
because they know the subscriber bases are all online. And I think it's something that we have to adapt to, like anything. We have to adapt to
yeah,
that. And it's faster. I feel like it's content is produced faster. And
yeah.
there's also a generation of, at Living, there was this thing called Good Things, where it were these little tips
I
and
remember that. Yeah,
yeah. So even now, when you look at today's the influence or whatever, it kind of repeats because it's a new audience, right? Like someone is redoing it just a little differently, but it's basically the same premise. So
yeah,
today's influencers have what we did, and then what we had came from somewhere else, like antique shows, experience, and things that in the past, books, and I think that's really fascinating to
mhm,
make
mhm.
that comparison.
Yeah,
um
I think everything today is going to have to be reinvented. I did an
Absolutely.
article. The Economic Times reached out to me. India Economic Times reached out to me and said, "Can you do an article on the future of work? Because you've been commenting on some things." And I was able to put it together because I said, "Forget about the way that we used to come in 9 to 5 and all this. It's over with. That's over. That'll never come back again. And just move on. Just
Yeah.
move on, and as much as you can." But then I see an article that came through this week about the CEO from, I don't know, want to give the wrong name of the company, but he was demanding everyone comes back to work. But meanwhile, he's chartered jets to come in to his office. They even built a mini office in his town for him to go to. But he's just, what are you thinking? And it was on the news,
Yeah. Yeah.
and all the employees were pushing back. So
Yeah.
again, it's talking about this new world of change as we go through. And working from home to design, how does that affect the design process? Is the collaboration still there, or do you need to be in a conference room to collaborate, or can we still do it on Zoom? How does
Yeah.
collaboration?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I remember during the pandemic, it was a little getting used to, I think I was one of the first on a particular brand that I went on a shoot at the tail end of the pandemic. So grid on the floor, mask, skeleton crew, and an
Yeah,
art director, a creative director, remote, and on a screen. It was a little getting used to. And I think when you're not in the room, there's
yeah,
some things that you have to get used to, like time, like, changing something on set
yeah,
requires 10 minutes as opposed to
yeah,
the 3 minutes that you're looking
yeah,
at us do it. I think it's just sort of getting used to a new way of working.
yeah.
Um, I do like it. I like less people on set. I don't mind
Okay,
that. I actually don't mind that.
okay.
Um, but the creativity is still there because, I work in a visual world, so it's they're looking at the images as we're shooting it sometimes, you
Yeah.
know, and that's good and bad. Digital photography has changed our world too, because
Yeah.
it's we take thousands of pictures as
Yeah.
opposed to in the past where it was film, you know, a 4x5 cost money for each 4x5, and it was
Yeah.
this fuzzy little 4x5 thing that we would judge from, and now that's all gone. Like that's
Mm.
it's faster. I think it's a faster
Yeah.
collaboration. You're getting, I think, more opinions as far as creatives are concerned, because everyone's looking for content and everyone's looking for inspiration at the same
Yeah.
time. So they say to you, well, I was thinking of a Tuscan table. Here's a tear. And then they go online, go to Pinterest, find it, send it to you. You're like, something like
Yeah.
this. That's how
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was working now.
That was the biggest challenge I had coming to work at our job,
Yeah.
because I came from IBM, business focused,
Yeah.
structured, revenue cost was always in consideration. And
Yeah.
I came to Martha as a training manager, and I stopped by a conference room one day, and they had all of these pine cones on the floor. I always tell this story. And they were trying to use pine cones for the Christmas shoot. And I asked what it was. I think Hannah Millman told me, says, they're trying to find pine cones for the tree for the Christmas shoot. I said, hell, you got a floor full of pine cones here. She said, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So right away, my mindset says hourly rate for 10 people to make a decision. I said, so how many times they're going to have to meet before they choose the right? She said, probably 2-3 times. Cost.
Yeah, it was a think tank. I think why I love Martha. You know, when you leave Martha, you know, you send an email, and when I left, you know, everyone sends me, and I'm like, oh, I was so lucky to work with such a talented group of people. Yeah. The talent part of it was baseline. Like you had to going in, that's what you needed. You needed that talent. What made it extraordinary was, I think, the ability for people to share, you know, their ideas, their traditions, which is a really big thing at Martha, especially for the holidays and things like that. And I think that's where the brilliance is that people that can recall their experiences and apply it. Like Hannah, you know, was it a trip, you know, to Skylands, and she saw a beautiful pine cone and decided to do an entire that, you know, a story on it. That inception goes from that, you know, one pine cone to a ceramic pine cone as an ornament, or a glass pine cone as an ornament. So it's this whole life of this product development that starts from this singular idea. And I think that's what I love the most about working there.
Yeah, you know, I say that I would not be here in Dubai at 5:20 in the afternoon if it wasn't for working there and learning what I learned there, was able to apply that, and just moved on from there once I decided to leave, because at the end it was kind of, it was time to go. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah. So that's another discussion. That's another discussion.
But there is life after Martha as well. You know, so many people have done so many amazing things and really followed their passions, which I love too. Seeing them sort of produce things and do what they really wanted. And some of them, you know, I feel like those careers, those passions started at Martha. You know what I mean? Like they worked on one project and they just totally got into it, and then they went off and did their own thing on it. And I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, but you know, but again, when you think about disruption, that entire business around publishing, when I saw the article that I saw the announcement that Nat Geo was ending their magazine. I saw that Weddings was ending their magazine, and I'm like, can I handle this? Because Nat Geo was a magazine I've always subscribed to, just flipping through it. Weddings was it was this thick at one time, and then as digitalization came in, it came down to this.
Absolutely. You know what's interesting is when I don't know about Dubai, when you go to a magazine rack, in Europe. There's still a lot of titles, which I'm always surprises me in comparison to the US. This is for home. I think Good Housekeeping is still strong. They have a digital, a digital presence and all that. But and then the other ones are thinner, and the ads sort of have gone online, right? Like the ad budgets sort of fulfilled online. So it's certainly a transition in what people want. I don't know if it'll come back. The magazines, the visceral, kind of turning a page idea. I think people are so comfortable with their devices, and these devices are everything.
I was tuned into iPhone 15. I watched the press conference and I said, "Do I trade up now and think do this?" Because photography was my hobby. I had the Nikon, I had all the lenses, but I'm like, who carries around all that stuff?
Yeah.
If you're just out, hold on a second. I need a different lens for that, different f-stop and all of this. No one does that anymore. So let's take it back to how would you advise people with disruptions? And we have to consistently kind of reinvent ourselves. I say that in a nice way because people are frustrated because things are changing. But my thought is get used to it, because if you're just starting out, you may have to reinvent yourself 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. I think that there's a world that in my world is certainly, things like Mid-Journey or AI. And then, I remember when Adobe first came out with Photoshop, and we, as a graphic designer, you're like, great. You know what I mean? I think they've always been retouching throughout history, like the portraits of the royal family in the National Gallery are sort of versions of what an artist wants them to look like, and I think that we've gotten, maybe we've gone too far as CGI is concerned, but I think we need to figure out how to work with it. Even with something like ChatGPT, it's going to be about being the editor of it. I think that's where I see it going, because a creative program or an app is only as good as the person using it. So the creativity, I think, is still there, because there will be bad design. There's no doubt about it. But imagine someone who is brilliant using it. Then that's something to be reckoned with, I suppose.
It's not the final product. It's what I tell people. What you get from ChatGPT or whichever one you're using is a starting point.
Yeah, and how many prompts you can basically do to
digging down deep, because for you to do just the first prompt and get that output, that could have taken you 3 days of researching, going here, cutting, pasting, and doing all these kind of things. Now I have a foundation, so I can take that. I've saved from my side instructional design, because I charge, if you want something that's unique from me coming in and doing a session on leadership development based on your criteria, I'm going to research that, and I'm going to build a foundation. It's kind of, I don't want to put myself into your category. Let me just step back for a second from the creative side. But I tend to do the same kind of things, because I want to make sure I understand what you're looking for, and I start that, and I get the first iteration of that. And then it's just a consistent kind of prompt, go back, do a little work, tie this in from another project, and all these kinds of things.
Yeah, I remember. I mean, I guess I've been part of all the innovations, in offices and business. I remember that my first design job, I was in charge of the fax machine, where every morning I had to unfurl this one piece of receipt and cut it in 8.5 by 11, so it was presentable for my boss. And I remember hating that machine. The clients wanted things twice as fast when that machine happened, where before you had a day to do it, right? It was instant. And I think the same happened with email. The same happened with phones, with text. And it just keeps going, and you sort of have to figure out how to work with it, with innovation, and work with tech. It's just part of our, it's so part of our lives, and, good and bad, but,
Good. Yeah.
it's, yeah.
So my thought is for people that goes on and on. I said, get over it, figure out how to do it, and just move on. I said,
Yeah.
this thing has been going on since the Industrial Revolution. That we've gone through changes,
Yeah.
and we got to figure out how we're going to make it work going forward. And you see these long articles and these. We got to put regulation. Don't even.
It is. I mean, in photography, there's a lot of CGI that the general public doesn't know that happens in the retouch to make things look perfect, and things like that. And we've sort of expected it, and it's interesting how far I think it'll go. Where rooms are just completely built. I did a Zoom sort of call with CGI artists from a company, and they wanted to see what a traditional stylist does in comparison to what they do, where they build a room from scratch. And I was blown away for what they did, and they asked me, where I get my inspiration. And I said, if I get inspiration from travel, from like walking and propping and seeing new things, or a museum or a movie or things like that. You see these experiences that sort of help me figure out inspiration. For them, it's interesting because they get a lot of inspiration from what I get too, but they'll go online, basically, and find that image that inspires them. It's a different way of thinking.
Yeah.
And I said, explain this to me like I'm a 3-year-old. Like, how did you build this room? And it's amazing. It's really, really amazing what they're doing. I mean, at one point I had maybe 30 people in front of me with blank looks on their faces as I'm talking, trying to explain what I do. But we reviewed each other's portfolios, and I think that it's interesting to see a new generation and how they're going to work with it. And I think that's kind of amazing to figure that out.
So I think it's next week. I just posted this. I think it's next week. They're having the first design show in Dubai.
Oh, wow. Okay. Like for furniture, for like ICFF.
Design. So I didn't really get into it. I know it's a design show, but everything can kind of fall into that. I don't think they've got into segmentation yet. But again, when you think of new regions of the world, let's get just touching the surface. Saudi Arabia, who the abaya was the outfit, and now what we're going to do beyond that. Because if you're in design specifically for female wear, there's a treasure trove in Saudi Arabia waiting.
Right.
So when you talk about inspiration, where does it come from? You talked about travel, and for people that travel, you see things. Oh, wow! Let me come back and take a look at this. The curiosity piece. Was curiosity a part of the success of being a good designer, of always being curious as to, wow, that's a great looking room? Because you asked the question, how did you walk me through the steps that you came up with that?
Well, I think that's right. I think that curiosity is what drives you, to see. I love seeing craftspeople and how they do it, that kind of like, where did silk come from and how is it produced, like all those videos and things like that. And then that, that inspiration comes from the curiosity of wanting to know. And I think that's something they certainly learned at Martha, where it's like question everything, you want to learn how to do something or learn something. That starts with curiosity, right? It starts with, and then you delve into a subject and you get really into it, and that curiosity, and it's another, notch on your belt when you learn that, when the curiosity turns into a learning experience, and now you have that under your belt. I had 2 friends who were getting married in Brussels, and There is no wedding cake really in it, like a wedding cake as we know it
Okay.
in Brussels. So I said, you know what, let me make you, a 3-tiered wedding cake. And I said it without ever not, I've never done it before, right?
Yeah.
I didn't, and then you delve into it, you buy the books, you start looking at videos and recipes, and all of a sudden you are carrying this 3-tier wedding cake into a room. And I think the curiosity of finding out how to do it is really a driving force for me anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And now I have that notch, right? It's like I've done
Yeah.
that, and I think that that experience is what makes you,
Okay.
and hopefully you can take that through your entire life and keep learning. And I think that's really important.
So let me flip this to, I'm going to say, a high school,
Mm-hmm.
and you're giving a commencement address.
Mm-hmm.
And what key career inspiration would you give them?
I've had to talk, I think through you, I had to talk to a high school class at Living once. And I went in and I remember Rebecca Robertson, I think, was before me. And she was talking about how she was like an assistant on, I think it was like a Jay-Z video for MTV. And I thought, you know what? How did you get that? And all the kids were so impressed. And then it was my turn, and then I just started telling them what to do. And I
What do I
remember
do?
I said, no one ever tells you of all those careers that that you don't know about. I grew up in a Filipino family, and where education was primary, and that, but the careers were doctor, lawyer, nurse,
Yeah. Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Engineer. Yeah.
Yeah, engineer. No one ever tells you about the other careers, and I think as a young person is to sort of ask people and to
Yeah.
be, it was like, what do you do? That kind of thing, and you'd be surprised what people tell you. And I
Mhm.
think that's where you make your connections as a young person,
Yeah.
because it's nothing you write in a book. No one. I never met a set designer, but
Hmm.
yet I knew that I found out what they were. I remember when I first moved to New York, and I had gone to a party, and my friend Renata was staying with me at the time, and I think she came home, and then she met this guy, and I go, "What did he do?" He goes, "He's a prop stylist." I'm like, "What's that?"
Yeah.
And he goes, "He gets paid to shop." And I'm like, "What?" And then it was, it's just the question of
Yeah.
all these production jobs that you know nothing about. I think that's a key to it,
Mm-hmm.
for a young person. And I remember telling that to several young people.
Yeah. So, you mentioned that, the prop stylist, of someone doing that. Here's what I think about, of how many lawyers I know that are not doing lawyering.
Yeah, their
How many,
second phase.
how many engineers I know that are not doing engineering.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
They went to school because of a reason, and they chose something. And I'm not saying it happens in all cases, but they chose a career based on someone in their family was doing something and it sounded cool. Well, I'll choose this. And I remember one young lady telling me that she was this is a young lady that worked at Martha Stewart too, but I won't go into exactly who she was. And she went to school for a lawyer because her family was lawyers. That first job, after working there, she says, "I can't do this." And she did it for a while, and then she eventually quit. And so one thing led to another. As she was a kid,
yeah.
I hope I don't pick this up. She would always take her dolls and take all the
Mhm.
clothes off of them, and she would design the clothes for the doll. And
That's
she came
amazing.
to us, and the only other thing I'll give it, she came to us to manage the closet,
Yeah.
managed it, and everything took off from there. But if you think of the people that got degrees
Yep.
and they're not doing that now, and so my thing is, one of the things COVID has kind of brought forward is really think about what you want to do and try something.
Yeah.
Because as you've seen with all this lockdown and all these things can change.
Yeah.
We got a
Yeah.
limited amount of time here. try and do something that is not work.
Well, and also take what probably got from law school was the business side, the communication side,
Yeah.
and like take those into the realm of, you know, a designer with a law degree is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
You know, to be able to like,
Okay.
know the contracts. Yeah, exactly. To
Yeah.
be able to read the
Yeah.
contract, understand them. That's just a plus, to have that. So I would
Yeah.
take those valuable tools that you learn. I think
Mm,
communication probably is the biggest, is the
yeah.
biggest. When people take a liberal arts, they're getting a general blanket,
Yeah.
and it's probably pretty good because then you get to get a little bit of everything,
Hmm.
you know, and still sort of be able to decide. I know that a lot of people of a certain age are going through their renaissance. My partner was in corporate for years, and he stopped his corporate job and he became an adjunct professor,
Yeah.
teaching. And then, I'm really happy for him that he made that transition into
Yeah.
something that becomes a passion,
Yeah.
becomes
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
that's more,
Yeah.
and just share your experience.
I teach at two MBA programs, one in Dubai and one in US, and I'm always up front, because I want to give them the real side of work. I want to give them the real side of transition and all these things. And you can have all these degrees and all of this, but think about what you really, really enjoy doing and try and, even if you get this job, try some things on the side, the gig economy, whatever it is, but keep trying something because you just may find out that what you're trying brings you more satisfaction than Sunday night angst that you got to get up Monday morning and go to.
No, and I think it's that dual thing,
Yeah.
to have two things. I had a full-time job, but then I was also doing this side hustle. And I know that side hustle is sort of a word that everyone sort of talks about.
Yeah.
It is
Overused word.
Yeah, it is kind of true though, to have something else, to have something else in the pipeline that you're working on or
Yeah.
working towards is a pretty good idea, a pretty good thing,
Yeah.
and I think it brings all those projects. I mean, I've been incredibly lucky that I go through my career and a project will come up that is completely different from what I do, or a twist on what I do. And I think that's what keeps me going,
Mm,
in the interest of it. Um,
yeah.
During the pandemic, there was no work. There
Yeah.
was, and all my shoots stopped. And I got a call from a company, from a friend from Europe, saying that there's this wine shop that wants to do a sort of a redo restoration on their old space. And it was the perfect thing for me at the time. It was like, it was at a pace where you had to be patient, but also gave me a creative outlet during the pandemic.
That was that 17th century. Was that
17.
the
No, this the wine shop is in Berkeley. It's called Berkeley Wine.
okay?
And I worked on that. When we lived in Brussels, we were only supposed to go for 3 years as an expat, and we ended up staying 10 because we loved
I
it,
know.
because of the
I
travel.
said 1 year.
Yeah, and after 8 years, we decided to find a place to live because we were renting,
Yeah.
and all the other expats had gone back to the U.S. and we were probably the last couple that stayed. So we decided to find a place, to live in. And I saw this building, and there was this small studio apartment. I thought, this is perfect, a little pied-a-terre, whatever. I go there, and then they said, this is sold, but there's another unit in the front. It was the bookstore. This is actually the office in the back, the one that you're looking at. So I said, do you want to see it? And I immediately said, yeah, I'd love to see it, thinking to myself, no way am I going to take this on. I just wanted to see the inside of this. So I went in. It was a wreck. You could see the bones were there, but it was just a wreck. But the owner was there.
Okay.
And this owner I was speaking to, and he's really into And I feel the same way into restoration as opposed to renovation, ripping
Okay.
everything out and whatever. So he was talking to me and he had this sort of passion to it. And then and then we got on and he was telling me all about the details and the craftsman and all that. And so then I said, well, thank you. And I went home. And then I got a call from his secretary saying, Mr. DeConnick thinks that you'd be the perfect candidate for this project. And I said, no, it's far too large that I don't need a bookstore, kind of thing. And then it has no bathroom. It has no bedroom. It had no kitchen. It was literally a store. And he said, well, what do you need for it? And I said, a bathroom, a kitchen, a bedroom. And then he asked what we wanted. And then we gave him a proposal. And he just wrote back the words, we can do that. And so it began, and the whole journey began. And it was, Brussels is all about craftsmen and the tradesmen.
It is. Yeah, it is.
So it was an incredible experience to be able to work with people, plasterers and iron workers and woodworkers. And I mean, the language barrier, it's hard. I'm not going to say it was easy. It was a lot of Google Translate, to get your idea across, but we did it. And I loved the whole process. It was a great.
So one question I wanted to ask you: you worked for major brands, Estee Lauder, Tiffany, Martha Stewart, and you picked up different experience from each. How did you put all that together? When I say put it together, what did you pull from each, and how did you take it and move beyond that and build the brand of Melanio versus the Estee, Tiffany, and Martha?
Yeah, it was the set skills that you learn from each job. Estee Lauder was all about packaging and displays, and I freelanced there. Tiffany I was an illustrator there, working on trophies, corporate trophies, and on crystal. And then with Martha, I feel like everything that I did up until Martha, when I got to Martha, it was like everything that I've learned I use here. And I think that was invaluable to work at Living. Like you learn all those design things, all those skills, all helped be a home editor, because you needed them all. You needed the experience of a little bit of everything in order to do that job. And I think that I took that. For a while, I worked as a florist for an event planner, and that certainly helped. I took a summer off after my business closed, and that's what I was doing basically for a summer. So I gained that experience, and I think that all of it helped me, be more of a creative person at Martha, because you came in with these skills.
Yeah. So all of those stops along the way that built the package into you as a brand today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That you could come in, because I'm listening to your story of coming into a bookstore that's just a mess, and to right away start conceptualizing what could be, besides the bathroom and the other things.
Yeah. It was a problem. It was the problem solving thing, I think that's what I sort of am about. We had these stained glass windows in the front of the building, and there were these really pale yellow. They were from the Renaissance thing, and we could not find this glass. There was not a match for this glass anywhere. And I went to glass stores. I went to stained glass stores, and all of a sudden I'm in San Francisco on a job, and I go into this tiny little stained glass store in Haight-Ashbury, and I walk in, and I had a little tiny sample of it. I go, "Do you have this?" And they're like, "Yeah, we do." And it's like that kind of, it is that kind of aha thing that constantly happens, where it's the hunt for something. Something that, and I think it's the idea of being able to multitask. I think that's a big thing for what I do.
So in closing, one of the goals of the show, as I was telling you before we became live, is a platform for leaders like yourself, just to share, the career journey and the experiences and all of that, because a lot of people are struggling today, and you hit on all key pieces. So are there any thoughts that you'd like to leave as we begin to close out?
I think for people who want something more than what they're doing, I think the curiosity is incredibly important, is to take those opportunities, because you never know where they're going to lead. I think that's very important, to know that everyone that you speak to has a capacity to influence you, and I think that if you keep thinking that way and being curious and wanting to learn and ask questions, I think that's the key. I mean, I love mentoring. I've had a lot of assistants through the years who I've taught things, and they've taught me things, and they've gone on to become stylists themselves, or photographers, or another crafts person where they have a passion. And I think that's the key. I love teaching other people too. So maybe that's in the future for me. But
Melanio 3.0. I'd say 4.0, whichever version it is. Well, you know what, man? Thank you so much for making time for us today.
Well,
giving us 45 minutes of your time. It was absolutely awesome. John Self said it was one of the greatest shows that we've had so far, and this is what we try and do. So, man, thank you. And when I get to New York, I'll give you a call, and we'll do lunch, we do dinner, whatever it is, and
love that.
We'll rehash. And I'm going to send Martha a copy of this too.
Okay. All right. Well, say hello to her.
Thank you so much.
Have a good day.
Okay. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.